Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Homeschool Live with the Old Schoolhouse. My name is Christine, and today we have Patrick from Northwest Treasures Geology joining us today. Thank you for being with us, Patrick. We're so glad you're here. And I'm going to get you to introduce yourself to our viewers today.
Okay, yeah, my name is Patrick Nurre. I grew up in the great state of Montana, about 700,000 to 800,000 people spread across the fourth largest state in the union. So there's lots to do and there's lots to see. And I could take you to places in Montana where you could get lost and no one would ever find you. And of course, that makes for great geology. And that's kind of the whole atmosphere I grew up in the state. But it really didn't connect with me in my faith until many years after I left home. I grew up really being saturated with secular geology. And so by the time I went to college, I was convinced that the Bible had just been a bunch of fairy tales or stories. It may have some moral connection, but it didn't, it wasn't really relevant. And so when I became a Christian in my senior year in college, I went to the University of Kansas, go to school there. And that's not like the rest of Kansas. It's a little bit more liberal. And so it was in that atmosphere that I became a Christian, however. And one of the first things that came up in my mind was, listen, I've got to resolve this stuff about Genesis. And I had remembered enough from my upbringing that the Bible was a moral book. And so things needed to come together or it just wasn't true at all, any of it. And I couldn't say that. And I knew that God existed. I just didn't know what I had to do with him. So as I began to read the Bible seriously for the first time in my life, while I was a senior, things began to really bother me about my own education and particularly my education in secular geology. I realized that there were a lot of things that were being withheld from me and from my investigation that probably made me more angry than a lot of other things did. So as I began to reevaluate my whole understanding there and reevaluate what I had thought about area geology, I kind of went through a second conversion. And of course, I knew my parents bringing me up. It was a good upbringing. I appreciate my parents. I really, to this day, have very fond memories of my parents and my home situation. But they were limited, just like a lot of us as homeschooling parents are very limited in what we should do and finding the appropriate resources and the appropriate tools to really equip our kids. I think most of us probably feel inadequate and feel like we're missing something. And when I started to reevaluate my position in geology, of course, it really did take me to the Word and to the Scriptures and to read them more than I had ever read them. And so those first few years in my Christian life were very foundational in my activities today. They really provided a strong foundation. And I think that connects a lot with why I'm doing what I'm doing. Our kids are growing now. I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. My 3-year-old grandson is here. And so if you hear some strange noises in the background or an attempt to take over things here, that you'll know that's him. But it's, seeing my grandkids, I probably initially thought that, hey, we'll just let the kids take over and it's up to them now. And we're just kind of the coaches. But I have found myself probably more involved in trying to influence my kids and my grandkids than I did when we just had our own children at home. And so Vicki and I have been involved with the homeschooling movement since the late 80s. And so I think there are a lot of things that we've kind of seen come and go, as well as maybe picked up a few pointers. And so we remain active in the homeschooling movement. We're involved with parents. We're involved with the homeschool conventions around the country. And I write curriculum for geology kits. I think it's a very special subject that I think will help equip our kids. But anyway, that's kind of a brief introduction. I'm sure that, Christine, you'll get into questions related to that. But that's a little bit of who I am. I've been doing this now for many, many years. And we now have a Geology Learning Center about 20 feet from our home.
Wow.
So all I need to do is get out and open the door, and we have, families coming. We have schools. At the end of this month, we'll have over 100 kids and their parents coming to see the Geology Learning Center. But in there, we have thousands of rock, mineral, and fossil samples, as well as I do classes there as well. So that has turned out to be a real focus of my vision at this point in my life. Slowing down in my 70s now, and I won't be able to do as much traveling as we would like, but the Geology Learning Center still kind of acts as an extension of all that we've tried to accomplish here. So anyway, Christine, I'll just turn it back to you. If there are things you want me to clarify or specific questions you want to ask, that's fine. But however I can be a help to parents and their children, that's my goal.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you have such a vast bank of knowledge when it comes to homeschooling. What would you say is one of the biggest challenges in your eyes that you've seen homeschooling families face today?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot, and this is not meant to be exclusive at all, but it is related to what I see as happening to our youth today, and that is something else is getting substituted in their minds, their wills, their emotions, than a long term equipping process to equip ourselves for being good soldiers of Christ. I don't believe that the church is accomplishing that, the church in general. And in our involvement with homeschool conventions, I began, after I became a Christian, my wife to be and I were both involved with Henry Morris and Dwayne Gish. Those are the kind of the granddaddies of the creation movement. But that was at a time when these debates were happening. And whenever we could find a book, we usually put it on sale. And there weren't many. But the thing I began to notice as we got more involved is the resources would increase. The questions would remain the same. In other words, there weren't new questions, or the books weren't going out of print because people now could answer all the questions. Today, there are thousands and thousands of books on the subject that we have access to. But at each homeschool convention, as I interact with parents and interact with the kids, the questions just are not getting answered. The connection between what we hear taught from the Bible and what we experience as we interact with the culture around us just is not getting answered. And I don't believe we're getting equipped. And I think there's probably, in my mind, if you boil it all down, it's kind of a Martha and Mary thing. You know, we're so engaged with trying to prepare our kids for life and trying to make sure we have the money to do what we're doing and make sure they can make a living, make sure they're not viewed as idiots, but, have a strong academic presence, and all of these things, I think, are getting in the way of really equipping our kids. We've kind of shoved that off to the church to do, and it's just not getting done. And so I think one of the main things that I like to encourage parents to do is, above all else that you do in preparing your children for life, help them have a strong, habit of self-study in the scriptures, not more books, not more commentaries, not more Bible school or programs, but so that they have a strong, uh, self-guided, if you will, study of the scriptures. We don't need to be afraid there. The Spirit will teach us all that he wants us to know, but being able to experience that and get equipped at doing that, I think is what's going to really prepare our kids for the future. Things change academically. Um, I'm certainly not doing now what I went to school for at University of Kansas. Neither is my wife. And so that should tell us something, that all of this stuff is going to be changing a lot over the course of their lives. But the one thing I want my kids to do is to be able to adequately wrestle with their conscience and wrestle with the things that God has spoken and know how to handle them and be able to influence others in our culture. I think that's probably the main thing. And I keep coming back to that. That's one of the main things we do in our education with families.
Hey everyone, I'm Steph, and Christine was having a little bit of technical difficulties, and so we're switching roles. She's going to be in the background, and I am up at the front with the privilege to finish this great interview with Patrick. So Patrick, tell us about what Northwest Treasures is all about and what you do for homeschooling families.
Well, great. Yes, we found that there was a real need within the homeschooling, especially the homeschooling group of families, that there was a need to equip parents and kids with how to use the biblical framework of Earth history to explain what we see all over and especially our two countries, what we see all over the place is these big mountains and the types of rocks in them. And we're both in dinosaur country and Alberta and Montana. And how to explain that stuff. The evolutionists really do have a head start on things with us. They've been doing this now for almost 200 years. And this is what we grew up with. And that scientists had this almost exalted position within our two cultures. And it's really whatever the scientists said about something, we acquiesce to them, and we're forced to either reinterpret our Genesis or leave it out. And I think a lot of parents feel very uncomfortable teaching earth science. Many don't want to even touch it because it raises conflict. Most pastors will not touch the subject. I pastored for 40 years, and I can tell you that is the truth. Most pastors will not touch the subject. They think it divides the church, and so they avoid it. But in the meantime, the kids aren't getting answers, and they're not getting equipped with how to do this, how to handle this subject, so that they're building their own faith, plus having something to say to the culture around them. Culture's steeped in these kinds of questions, and they're also steeped in the secular answers to them. And of course, that either forces you to leave the faith, or it forces you to leave kind of a double life where you see the Old Testament as kind of a necessary evil that was perhaps replaced by the New Testament. And it's just not a good place to be. And so that's what we're really specializing in, is equipping parents and kids to build their faith and the faith of others. That's necessary. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. If you can't believe the scriptures, I don't see how you can ever expect to please God, because that's the rub, that's the connecting point. And that's what finds pleasure with God, just as Abraham found pleasure with God. Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. So we've developed within that, we've developed a whole system of field trips and what we do on field trips is not just giving parents a break, but it's we use the field opportunities to equip. And we've developed an entire curriculum from pre-K all the way through high school. One of the big challenges that parents have there is they teach earth science as a separate, unrelated subject, mostly because they have to at some point. And they usually do it in fourth grade or eighth grade. They do it typically for a semester. And then everything else is by maybe video and Sunday school class or things like this. But it reveals something that should be different in our homeschooling. Most of the subjects we teach our kids are academically based. So teaching writing skills, teaching chemistry skills, and those are things that are much more academic. But you cannot teach earth science from an academic perspective. It doesn't work because in geology specifically, and in related fields like anthropology and paleoanthropology and paleontology, all those assume a view to interpreting landforms and fossils and rocks. And if you don't have that view, if you're not connected with that view, then of course you're outside the whole realm of life. So we have to teach earth science differently. We have to teach and equip our kids with the worldview. And so we think that really begins. You have a subject taught, maybe it's volcanoes. Maybe a kid has an interest in volcanoes as a pre-K or a kindergartner. And so you part of your study is just going to be on volcanoes and a biblical view of volcanoes. Did God create them? When did they surface? What do they do? And how are they related to the flood? And how are they related to creation? So start building that worldview. And then the next semester or the next year, you get into other subjects. In our for the pre-K, we have volcanoes, we have fossils and dinosaurs, and we have rocks and minerals. Now, all of those then start with the biblical framework of Earth history, and that is Genesis is history. It's not something you learn on Sunday, but you treat it as a history book. So it gives the account of what happened and when. And it may not give us all the answers we seek, but it provides a framework for teaching and equipping our kids. And as the kids get used to doing that year after year after year, then by the time they leave home, hopefully you've equipped them with enough so that they can wrestle through issues of life as they encounter them. That's what you want to do. You're not going to be there forever, and you can't make the decisions for your kids, but you can equip them on how to think and how to reason in some of these areas without sacrificing their biblical view. And so with that, we've developed about 24 different textbooks that are designed to do that from pre-K through high school. They're cost conscious, and they help then parents do a little bit, takes it out of their hands. There are no teacher guides or how to teach the thing. You learn it right along with the kids. And then we have videos that we've done that supplement those things. A lot of times Vicki and I will be traveling and something will look interesting, so we'll pull over. She'll get her phone out and hook me up to a microphone, and I'll just explain it. Okay, how does our driving through the Drumheller Formation, for instance, pull over, how does our biblical view explain this? And we do a lot of things. We have a lot of things like that online. We want kids getting comfortable with the use of the Bible as a history book and providing an account that they can use to explain. Geologists essentially do that themselves. Secular geologists have their own framework. Now, it's a secular framework, so it rejects the Bible, rejects the flood, the creation, and looks at things from purely a naturalistic point of view. So we tend to trust them to give us the answers, but they don't. They destroy our faith in the Bible, and then they provide their own morality. And you don't want your kids being entrenched in that. You want to help them combat that. I think too, it'll give them a lot more confidence as they relate to the culture around them. Many of our kids have unbelieving friends, and as they begin to ask questions, then our kids also can help provide some answers. So that's what we're all about. And this Geology Learning Center that I talked to you about earlier is really designed to do that. We have about 15 different displays within Geology Learning Center that can be either guided by me or self-guided. Person comes in, he can read from beginning to end. How do we view these things, and what kind of habits do we need to develop in order to view the fossils and the rocks from a biblical perspective? And so that's been a big boon. We have field trips that we do. We have, including the one to Yellowstone every year. It's now our 16th year of doing it. We have classes, online classes we do. We also have classes over, Zoom that we do for kids. I've given classes to kids in Ireland and other exotic places, Canada. And so it's just providing resources as well as how to do this whole thing. How do we handle this? And understanding the scripture. I think one of the biggest dividing points in the church today is actually the age of the earth. That's a hotbed for arguments and all kinds of things. And it really shouldn't be. It's really quite a simple subject. But I think most of us believers don't study the scriptures enough really to have a command of the subject. And I think most Christians are a little afraid to handle it because science, secular science, has so brainwashed us with a way of thinking that we can't really discern, which leads me to another part of our equipping process, and that is helping parents and kids understand the differences among science, history, philosophy, and consensus. If we can master those 4 words and learn how to identify the differences in the statements we hear, we'll do a huge job of equipping our kids to think critically. So that's really what we're all about. We've specialized. Years ago, I used to do open air talking on college campuses, and just found myself been spread way out, just kind of a jack of all trades and not really mastering anything. So I decided years ago, 30 years ago, as a matter of fact, that I was going to concentrate on just one thing, and that was the Genesis flood as a history of our earth, how we got everything we see on it, how it relates. And I think that is a real key to equipping our kids to handle life as well as all the nonsense that's surfacing today. We want to help kids understand, look, marriage, is it obsolete? How would you answer that question? Well, no, it's not obsolete. Well, maybe for your generation it wasn't, but is it obsolete now? And the only way to answer that, of course, is a firm command of the scripture that you have. And there's lots of subjects that follow suit. So that's what we're all about.
I will say, as somebody, so I've taken your geology. I've taken it. Well, I took it along with my son, geology course on Schoolhouse Teachers, and actually really just seeing your website recently, just as I was preparing for this interview here, that it seems like you have so much more even than you had recently, or sorry, I shouldn't say recently, but then you had maybe a couple of years ago. I don't think I've been to your website for a couple of years because I've taken courses on dinosaurs as well. Again, that was on Schoolhouse Teachers. but I really am impressed by your website. So, and I know many of our viewers are, especially many of our viewers are Christian. And actually, even if you're not homeschooling, whatever you've come upon this video, you're not actually a homeschooler, know that this kind of training, this kind of education, should I say, is really important, because as you said, Patrick, it's not really just about the geology. I mean, there's lots that you're teaching in that area. I learned so much about geology just from that course recently, but it's actually about, because geology is so related to a different worldview, that it's one of those big divides in what we're teaching our kids. Okay, are you believing it's coming from, you know, this side of the story or this side of the story? Is it coming from God's story, or is it coming from man's story? And that's
that's really a key. You know, many people that I talk to just don't feel comfortable talking about the area, but it's actually should be one of our strongest suits. That should be one of the strongest subjects about us, because scientists do one thing. If they do it well, they do it by observation, testing, and repetition. And so long as you handle those three words, then anything that gets into the age of the earth is outside of science. It's in the realm of history. That is what we are primarily equipped to do. History. We have a Bible that gives us a complete history of the earth from beginning to end, even before it happens. And so we should not feel ashamed, and we shouldn't feel inadequate. But I think we give scientists a position in our culture that I don't think is healthy.
Yeah, it's not leading in the right direction. A little bit too of a wide path, the wide gate, as God has been showing me, that wide and narrow gate in all the different areas of life where that applies to. So, so tell us where to check out Northwest Treasures. I put, and I'll actually pop that up there again, just your website, but where can we find that? Just, you can say the website out loud here as well, Patrick. And also, I just wanted to, I think you said that, right? That there are virtual classes, because as much as you've got stuff going on, and it's worth the trip wherever you are. I'm up in Canada too, so it's going a little bit south for me, but it's definitely, these are what Patrick puts on with Northwest Treasures, the tours he has, the family camp. I thought that was super cool.
Well, and that's affordable too. The people that run that camp out there, it's right along the Columbia River. And which should relate to Canada. I mean, the Columbia River starts up in Canada. And so, you know, so we're kind of related. But we've had a lot of people visit us from Canada. And so I try to get up there as much as I can to do, you know, speaking engagements and attend, especially the convention in Alberta, which I'll be at this year.
I'll be at the end of May.
Yep.
Great. Okay. Well, as you can see on the screen, go check out northwesttreasuresgeology.com. That's where you're going to find the great education that you can get, not just on geology, but biblical geology, which is so important for our kids, and really equipping them with the way to defend their faith. I like that. Actually, I'm taking that right from your website too.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, my wife has really responsible for our website. She has really done a good job of it. I don't like even cell phones. You know, I hate them. And technology is not something that's really my strong point. I like the yellow pad, and I still use it today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being with us today, Patrick. Thank you all for watching, and we'll sign off for now, and have a blessed day.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.